Line Fever Kicks video podcast. And we're back for another week at the start of a great weekend of rugby league on both sides of the globe. I'm joined once again by Tony Adams. Coming up, we're going to talk about, for those watching in the Northern Hemisphere, St Helens blowing up about John Asiata. We're going to talk about what's wrong with the Roosters, and we're going to preview in a really entertaining and unboring and quick way the weekend of rugby league. Welcome back, Tony. How are you? You just watched the first game of the weekend, and it was a pretty cruisy win for the Broncos over the Roosters at the Gabba.
Yeah, and I've got to say, Steve, the more I see the Broncos, the more I think they can win the comp. It's not quite the Broncos of the glory days when they were just about the Queensland State of Origin team, but by geez, they're an exciting football team, aren't they? Reece Walsh, probably the most dangerous player in the NRL at the moment. Adam Reynolds directing traffic around. But I guess the other big point out of this game, the Roosters, they're just terrible. They just can't score points. They scored 2 tries, both in the second half, both from kicks. And apart from that, probably never looked like scoring. And it's been their biggest problem all year. I think last week, if not this week, that they had less points on the board than the Tigers, who can't play at all. So it's a real problem. Yeah,
the halftime dressing room report on the channel I watched, I think we might get different coverage. We get the Fox coverage and you might have watched on 9. But the halftime report here was that Trent Robinson said, there's talk of a decline, but I have faith in you, which was an interesting halftime address, unless I misheard that. If you're watching, Trent, I apologize if I misheard it. But that, I mean, are they in decline? Why are they in decline? Can they get out of it? Do they have to wait for the next generation of players to come through?
Well, halftime was 20-0, wasn't it? So it was game over. And you look at a lot of the Roosters games, they're nil at halftime. And you're nil at halftime, you're not going to win too many games. And I think clubs, as you and I have seen many times, Steve, they go through cycles. The Roosters, for much of the last 10 years, I think they've only missed the finals once. Most years they're in the top 4. But their best players are starting to get older. James Tedesco, lots been said about him. I think he's a little bit past his best. Jared Warrior-Hargraves, they've given him another year. He offers something, but makes mistakes. The referees don't like him, and probably for good reason, because he does tend to belt blokes and gets himself binned and gives away penalties. And we saw that again tonight. Brandon Smith hasn't been the buy of the year as I predicted he'd be, and they don't have a halfback. So a lot of problems for the Roosters, and there's no real quick fix there. So I'm not sure what Nick Politis and Robbo are going to do about it. It's a real problem.
And we can't show match footage here, although the rules are different in between England and Australia. We could try it on, but we won't. But
do we show the NRL logos here, or do we have to put them on?
But Jared Warrior-Hargraves' big hit on Payne Haas, I think it was, and we had a send-off last week in Super League over here, which looked the same or even a little less flush. So you know, it's an interesting one though. Those tackles at the moment, you don't really know what's going to happen, do you?
Yeah, exactly. And I thought with Jared's reputation in the game, I thought that would be a sin bin at least, if not a send-off. And he just gets put on report. But having said that, with his record, I think he's looking at probably 2 to 3 weeks at least for that tackle. So, but yeah, no consistency. You just wonder what's going on.
Okay, now people, Phil Rogers, if you're watching, he was great. He watched the first show we did just on Twitter live, and he immediately supported us. He immediately got on Patreon and supported us. So we're just starting out here, and we haven't got a flash studio or a great mic or anything like that. We're just building up slowly. So if you want to help us out and you want to join Phil Rogers, you can do so by going to patreon.com/White Line Fever. And we want to thank Phil Rogers, Richard York, and Tony Darcy Lussick, who do support us on Patreon. So good on you guys. Also want to thank Vivek Nayak, who supports us through the Rugby League Nines Patreon and through Patreon Long Reads, which is a thing I do with John Davidson. If that's more you go with some stories popping in your inbox every day. Charlie One, from the One family, Phoenix Taffer, Tony Collins, the great rugby league historian, Martin Ryan, Brandon Dawson, Harvey Coyne, Phil Kaplan from Scratching Shed from 4020, great journalist and publisher there. Thanks for getting on board. Ben Pearson and Ryan Dushy. You've got to thank people, Tony. You've got to thank people who support us.
For sure.
Yeah, and now we're going to play a little game, which we played last episode. It's called Love Hate. And I just wanted to make sure I got my facts right here. So I just looked it up on my phone, got my phone here. So St Helens blew up this week over Challenge Cup semi-final tackles by John Asiata on Ignatius Parsi and Alex Wormsley, who've each been ruled out for the rest of the season. Now, they're the world champions, have won 4 Super League titles in a row, and a lot of people think this is the end of their title defence with losing these good players. And also Louis McCarthy-Scarsbrook, he's out for 2 weeks as well. And Paul Wellens did his weekly media conference and basically said that John Asiata was responsible for all 3 injuries with a hit that is diving at the ankles, but when the play is not already held by other defenders. So in other words, the RFL are saying that we can't punish someone for something that isn't in the rules or isn't in the current list of interpretations as bad as you think it might be. So the way I'm going to frame this, Tony, is I'm not going to say was the tackle love or hate. You're not going to love that tackle, right? I'm going to say was Paul Wellens blowing up about it? Do you love or hate that?
Yeah, well, look, anyone who supports their players obviously has passion for the game, and you've got to love that. And yeah, those tackles are interesting, and it sets a bit of a precedent. They actually remind me of NFL tackles. You watch a lot of NFL players, and they do that. They basically use their body rather than their hands and launch it at the players' ankles, and as we've seen, it can cause damage. So it's probably something that needs to be looked at, and it'll be very interesting if John Asiata does it next week. If the Rugby Football League or anything like the NRL, next week it'll be a penalty.
Yeah, no, I love Paul Wellens. I love the way he talks. He's very, very passionate, and I think he's a fantastic speaker, and I can imagine he has a lot of impact in the dressing room, on his players because of the way he talks. But and it isn't apparent, right? It isn't apparent if you just watch him talk and have a look at the video. But it is a blind spot in the rules where you can do a prowler tackle if no one else has got the guy, And as John Wilkins said, John Asiata is endangering himself by diving that low. That he's going to get a boot in the head or whatever. I think the rules will change. I think in the next off season, this sort of tackle will be outlawed, and I think we can then look back on Paul Wellens' outburst as being, the catalyst for that. Obviously, John Asiata and Lee would be feel aggrieved because they've been found to have not broken any rules, yet he has been singled out publicly and sort of eviscerated for ending the seasons of 3 players. And so from that point of view, I don't love it. But in the end, I think the outcome of this will be positive because I think this sort of tackle will probably be outlawed next season. Tony, obviously in the NRL this week, we'll just zip through since our last episode. I guess we covered in midweek scoops, which I invite everyone to watch, and it's on Tony's channel. Tony Moley Adams' channel. He went through some great news there about Ash Werner and about James Bentley, and of course about Jackson Hastings. If you miss that, but since then, Tony, anything quickly in the last 24 hours? Obviously, as you alluded to, the players' NRL jerseys the badges were taped over tonight, and that will happen all weekend.
Yeah, it was a very strange look, but just backtracking for a sec, Steve, speaking of John Asiata and passion, I actually wrote last week that John Asiata's coming back to the NRL, and I quoted his manager as saying that, and the boss of Lee, I can't remember his name, but he's blown up and challenged me for a £5,000 bet as to what John Asiata's doing next year. So full marks to him for passion, the boss of Lee, whoever he may be.
He will love the fact you don't know who he is because he's quite a character now. His photos everywhere. He wears those leopard print jackets. Now, the other thing I want to offer everyone who's watching, I don't, not too much spam, right? Not too much advertising. Really quickly, I'm going to put up a picture up here of an Ireland cap. I'm going to offer it to you for half price, $9.25, if you enter the code YouTube, and I'll put the link in the comments. Now, Tony, we're going to go through tips. I guess we'll start with the NRL tips, which I'll throw to you. So Friday night, 2 matches, back to normal post-Origin scheduling. West Tigers and South Sydney. What's going to happen there?
Well, just quickly, Steve, the Tigers have to be the most consistent team in the NRL. Punters are doing very well on them because they lose every week. And unfortunately, most weeks they lose rather badly. So I think it's just a question of South by how many with Latrell Mitchell in there. I think it's a definite South 13 plus, that one.
Melbourne Storm, Parramatta Eels.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. Para been a bit hot, cold. Craig Bellamy seems to get to, the Storm up for these big games at home. I can't go past the Storm.
Canberra and Newcastle, a couple of expansion teams. I was going to say New South Wales, but Canberra's in the ACT.
Yeah, well, Newcastle putting on a bit of a late run to the finals. Kalen Ponga in great form. Jackson Hastings playing well. But having said that, Canberra at home, I think the Raiders.
The battling Steel City of Wollongong against the Silvertails of Manly, and Cogra, I guess, thrown in as well. St George Illawarra, Manly.
Yeah, look, if the Tigers are the most consistent team, the Dragons aren't far behind them. They tend to lose on a regular basis, and I think they'll lose this one too. Even though Manly aren't setting the world on fire, I think it'll be a tough Manly win.
Penrith versus Cronulla.
Yeah, Cronulla have been a bit disappointing this season. They haven't quite matched their heroics of last year, where they finished right up there before going out in straight sets. And with that in mind, Panthers, Nathan Cleary back, should win fairly comfortably. And
the first game on Sunday, Canterbury at home to the Dolphins.
Yeah, look, the Dolphins, they've hit the wall, but they keep on keeping on, and they're still in the hunt. I think they're very, very much in the finals battle, and I think the Dolphins, with more to play for, will take the points.
Queensland Derby, Gold Coast and North Queensland.
Yeah, the Titans are still in the race as well, but the Cowboys are just running hot at the moment. I think they're on a bit of a streak and should win fairly comfortably. Tom Dearden playing great. Chad Townsend dictating terms, and Scott Drinkwater playing sensational at fullback.
Now, before we do Super League, just want to draw everyone's attention to a great cause. Anne Jouliffe, the wife of Brian Jouliffe, the chairman of Wales Rugby League, a man who played against the 1982 Kangaroos twice. Brian stood down because wife Anne is in the middle of a cancer battle. She needs a stem cell match. Needs a 90% match to undergo some surgery, which could be, very important. That surgery, it doesn't get much more important. So there's a bit of an appeal to everyone involved to just basically order a swab kit and get yourself tested. If you don't match, then at least we know. So the more people who get tested, the better. So I'm putting a link for under 30s and over 30s in the YouTube comments. Obviously, if you're watching somewhere else, you can't see those links, but I invite you to go to youtube.com/Whiteline Fever TV to see those links. Okay, Tony, I'm in the hot seat now. Give me some Super League games to tip.
Okay, well, the first one, St Helens, who we've been talking about, against the Leeds Rhinos.
Yeah, this is a tough one because is the era of St Helens over? Is it over? Is the run over? And I guess there'll be a lot of emotion this week where Saints try to prove otherwise. Leeds, you just don't know what to expect. Their coach even says, stop expecting things and just sit back and enjoy matches. And they tend to be playing like that. So it's a bit of a toss of the coin, but I do think Alex Wormsley, to me, is just such an important player. And just based on his absence for the rest of the season, I'm going to go for Leeds.
That's an upset there. Okay. Next one's Hull KR against Castleford Tigers.
I think the high of Hull KR going to Wembley will be too much for them to deal with, and I think they're going to be beaten. They're going to be upset there by Cass.
That's another upset. Okay. You're going to go for 3 in a row here. Wigan Warriors against the Lee Leopards.
I'm going to go for Wigan because for the same reason. I think Lee, they would have had quite an emotional week. Wigan, they'd be very disappointed, very down. They had that dismissal as well of Joe Shorrocks, which I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to go for Wigan in that one.
Okay. Then we have Catalan against Salford.
Salford away from home. Catalans did lose to Huddersfield at home. This one could go either way, but I like to look at Catalans. They're worthy leaders of Super League at the moment. So Catalans.
Okay, and the last game, Wakefield against my favourite Super League team, Warrington Wolves.
Warrington, very unpredictable. Wakey trying to avoid relegation. If Cass get up, as I'm predicting, it'll put extra pressure on them. Warrington could lose this, but I reckon in a close one, they'll just edge it, maybe by a drop goal, field goal. So, guys, I hope that was a short and sweet episode of White Line Fever Kicks. And if you're listening, it was a short and sweet episode of Masky and Moley. Next week, it swaps back, right? So the video is going to be Masky and Moley. It's going to be on Moley's channel. I want to thank everyone who's supported the channel too. We've already got well over 100 subscribers. I was a bit worried that with the viewers, but it really picked up with Tony's midweek scoops. And so, look, if you're watching this, you really got to subscribe to that channel. It's just a click, costs you nothing. So it's Tony Moley Adams on here on YouTube. And that's it for the podcast, Tony. Enjoy your weekend of footy. And we'll be back with one of your many properties next week. It might be midweek scoops. It might be mountains and molehills. It might be another one. You might have to come up with another one. You might get banned by someone else. You have to tell us when Jackson Hastings unblocks you as well.
His mum's working on it, so we'll see how much power she's got.
See you next week, everyone.
Thanks, guys.